Hello Disney fans, this is Christian Milan again. Here I am at the Disneyland Resort and I wanted to share some secrets and myths about Disneyland. Now, do you ever feel like you hear the same facts and mysteries about Disneyland, such as the Matterhorn basketball court, the Wizard of Oz, and the Steve Martin acting on Main Street at the Magic Store? Well, I'm here to share with you some facts that you may have never heard. And if you do hear something that you haven't heard before, please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. The first fact is the opening day of Disneyland. Now, everyone knows that July 17th is the day that Walt officially made his announcement about Disneyland being open. An art link letter and the famous ABC broadcast of the opening of Disneyland. Actually, when it was advertised in July 18th was announced as the opening day of Disneyland to the general public. In the newspapers, they announced that July 18th will be allowing paid customers to come into the park. Now, it would be like if you're watching a movie and the opening day of a movie is July 18th and they have press screenings on July 17th. So here we are starting at the railroad. Now, most people know that the railroad was owned by a separate company from Disneyland Incorporated called Worlar, which is Walter spelled backwards. But you probably didn't know that the railroad was only meant to go from Main Street back to Main Street and not stop at different lands along the way. That's why they called it the Grand Circle Tour around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom. So do you see these eucalyptus trees in the background there? That is one of the oldest trees in Disneyland Park. They're actually used as a windbreak for the walnut groves that were here from the family that owned the land here at Disneyland. But incidentally, that family had two daughters named Kate and Ella, and that's how we get the name of the street, Katella. So here we are on Main Street, and what a lot of people don't realize is that even though the colors look identical to the Main Street in Disney World, when the designers painted and chose a paint job for Main Street, they took into account the tint, the slightly red tint for the smog in LA versus the blue skies in Florida. So even though the paints look similar and they're slightly different, to take into account the different colors of the sky. So here we have the Opera House and the Mad Hatter store, and if you go over here, this blue building right here used to be the site of Jimmy Starr's store on Hollywood Memorabilia, where he sold costumes and such. And little known fact, Jimmy Starr actually supplied Walt with the black and white silent films that he showed on Main Street Cinema. Now here we have the Plaza Inn, and the time period that Disney wanted to work in Main Street was 1890 to 1910. 1890 because that's when they have horse-drawn carriages, and after 1910 would be when they use electricity everywhere, and he still wanted to use gas lamps. And this little cross area right before you get to the hub is a section they called Plaza Street. Disney was almost going to put a place called Edison St where he'd show the progress of electricity, and General Electric would sponsor some exhibits and some shows, and it kind of showed that progression. Sounds familiar? It's actually the lead into Carousel of Progress. And this cross street was going to be called Plaza Street, and that's why they called this inn the Plaza Inn. So of course, here we come to Sleeping Beauty's castle. And did you know that Sleeping Beauty's castle was originally going to be called Fairy Castle, Fairyland Castle, and eventually Peter Pan Castle? And Disney even called it Snow White Castle in the Man in Space documentary for Disneyland USA. And that eventually changed to Sleeping Beauty Castle, but that was perceived a pretty big risk. The movie would not be released for another 4 years. So this is the Disney partner statue, and do you know what Disney is pointing to? They didn't have him point to the castle because that's what wasn't as important to Disney as the incoming guests that come into the Disney parks. That was what was important to Disney, the incoming guests. He wanted to have Mickey, him, be partners in this thing that he created for his guests. And what he decided was that he wanted guests to feel like, each and every guest to feel like they were the king when coming into Disneyland. So Mickey Mouse is 3 feet tall, and The reason why they know Mickey Mouse is 3 feet tall because of Fantasia. Now, how tall is Walt? By this statue, you would think that he's 6'5", but Walt was actually 5'10", 5'10". They added a couple inches to him, and this statue was never made when Walt was alive. Blaine Gibson showed Walt a bust and of his head, and Walt said, "What am I going to do with that?" and stuck it in the corner. He did not want a physical representation of him in the park. So here we are in front of Small World. Now, see those little spinning things at the top there, on the top of the peaks? That was Raleigh Crump's imitation of Leota, Madame Leota from Haunted Mansion, Leota Toombs' earrings. And you see the trees at the top of the spires there? It looks like miniature trees almost that are at the top. Walt, when seeing the model one day, just stuck a bunch of toy trees there and said, let's do it that way. And that's how they designed it, just trees on top of Small World. It's odd, but that's the way Walt wanted it. Why was New Orleans Square built? The reason why is 2 reasons. One, he wanted a place for Lillian Disney to shop for her antiques and not having to go all the way across country. The other reason is it provides a visual break from seeing the Disneyland Hotel from within the park. The Disneyland Hotel, Jack Rather, he was required to put balloons at the top of the hotel so that Walt Disney can see while it was being constructed whether or not you could see it from inside the park. And a pretty well-known secret is that Disneyland has a secret club called Club 33. But what most people don't know is the reason why Club 33 is there is because during the World's Fair, he had corporate sponsors like General Motors that needed a corporate lounge in back of their attraction for their corporate sponsors. That's when Disney decided and thought of the idea of having his own lounge for his own VIPs in his park. There's also one more corporate lounge in Disneyland Park, and that's located in Innoventions. So right behind me is Tom Sawyer's Island, which became Pirate's Lair. Now, Tom Sawyer's Island was one of the few places in Disneyland which was completely designed by Walt Disney. Walt Disney came into the Imagineering office and said, "Why do you guys get to have all the fun?" So he took some paper home and he drew out pretty much the outline of all of Tom Sawyer's Island, and was one of the few places in the park that was free. Attractions cost 10 cents to 35 cents in 1955. Well, Tom Sawyer's Island was meant to be a free attraction for kids. Here we have behind me the Columbia, which is currently under construction. A pretty big myth is that the Columbia is a miniature replica of a ship. But that's not true. It's actually full size. It's a full-size reproduction of the HMS Bounty. And you've heard of hidden Mickeys, and this is a hidden Mary that you could find in the Indiana Jones ride. If you go to the queue and you look at the Around the Globe video almost at the end of the line, you see on the grill of the Jeep, on the third bounce, a silhouette of Mary Poppins. You can see it right here. See on the grill, you see Mary's head and the hat and silhouette form. So everyone knows that at New Tomorrowland there's a lot of edible plants, but did you know that at the original Tomorrowland in 1955, that is where they invented the Hamburger conveyor belt, where they automatically cook hamburgers on a conveyor. John Hench designed the Skyway accordion landing that you see that where people board airplanes. It used to be that in airplanes, the ramp would come down and they would go up the stairs, but John Hench, when he designed Rocket to the Moon, he actually invented that Skyway that connects the people from the airport to the airplane. So here we are at Autopia, one of my favorite rides in Disneyland Park. Did you know that in the 1950s there was something called segregation? But in 1955's Disneyland, there was no such thing as segregation. Everyone got into the cars together, whether it be whites, blacks, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. Disneyland was a place where he wanted to be accepting of all cultures. Segregation did not exist in Disneyland in the 50s. So those are my facts of Disneyland. If you didn't know them, let me know, or if you find some facts that you'd like to share, let me know in the comments below. But thanks for watching. Hope you have a magical day. Here's a fun fact. It was the first sight of a hidden Mickey. John Hench designed the first hidden Mickey ever in an attraction on the Mission to the Moon ride. It was when you're leaving the spaceport, when you're leaving Earth, you could see the spaceport with two concentric domes on either side. And that was the first hidden Mickey.